June 1, 1944. In fighter pens scattered across East Anglia, armourers chalked new manifold pressure clearances on flight line boards, while crew chiefs reset tiny aneroid switches inside Merlin control housings. The order was simple but radical. The 8th Air Force would supply its P-51, P-47, and P-38 units with 100 to 150 grade fuel, immediately. With it came authorization to push boost far beyond the long-familiar 67 inches of mercury, unleashing short bursts of power that pilots had only tasted in trial hops. The timing, days before the landings in France, was no coincidence. The Allies were about to bet that chemistry could buy altitude, rate of climb, and dash speed at the exact moment they needed to break the Luftwaffe over the invasion beaches. The path to this day ran through test stands and cautious memoranda. Technical operations at 8th Air Force had service-tested the fuel blend, often labeled 44-1 or 100-150, from October 1943 through March 1944, then concluded that if extra performance was desired from frontline P-38s, P-47s, and P-51s, 150 grade fuel would provide it, with a caveat. Increased lead content meant more spark plug fouling. But in May 1944, the calculus shifted from can to must. Fighter Command requested immediate supply, and the production and logistics arms were tasked to modify every fighter in the UK for 150 grade within 30 days. Deliveries began within a week of D-Day. By early July, 8th Air Force fighters were routinely operating at the new, higher combat power settings the fuel allowed. What changed inside the Mustang? In simple terms, more detonation margin lets you cram more air-fuel mixture into the cylinders. With 150 grade came clearance to raise the P-51's V-1657. Merlin from the long-standard 67 HG war emergency rating to roughly 72-75. CG unit practices varied with engine batch and orders. At these settings, the engine made markedly more power for brief, tactical windows, which translated into faster climbs and higher dash speeds at the altitudes where escorts met interceptors and where Mustangs pounced on withdrawing fighters. The measured gains were real, not folklore. In Army Air Force's proving ground tests, increasing the P-51B's manifold pressure from 67 to 75, CG added on the order of 15 mph across broad slices of the altitude band and cut time to climb by about a minute to 30,000 ft. Gold dust in a turning. Burning sky. The number that lives in popular memory is 490 Mach-EH, and wartime scuttlebutt certainly circulated head-turning figures. Controlled testing tells a more nuanced story. A North American P-51B-15, AAF 43-2477, running 44. One fuel at 75, HG posted 444 AMPA, true airspeed near 2800 ft without wing racks. The same airplane at 67 TOWs HG ran R417 MPH in the same configuration, with the 150 grade boost worth roughly a 6 out of 7% increase. Field conditions, cold air, ram pressure and a steep dive. Exceptionally slick airframes could yield higher peak numbers, which explains why some veterans remembered speeds in the high 400s. But the documented, repeatable result, mid-440s at altitude under WWII, is impressive enough, and it mattered tactically every time a Mustang needed the last 10-20 mph to close a deflection shot or extend away. Britain's experience ran in parallel and reinforced the choice. RAF trials had already cleared the Merlin 66 in Spitfire 9s for +125 lbs boost with 150 grade by March 1944, and by early May select wings were flying it operationally. Reports from Air Defence of Great Britain in June praised the fuel's value, while acknowledging backfire issues that were later solved with adjustments. By August, 16 RAF squadrons had converted, and the performance bump at sea level, vital for anti-diver duty against V-1s, was dramatic. RAF tables showed Mustang 3 speed gains from 360 to 390 km/h at sea level on 150 grade, a massive advantage for chasing pulse jet bombs and for low-level dashes over occupied Europe. By the end of this first act, the pieces were aligned, 150 grade fuel on tap, boost limits raised, aneroids reset, and pilots briefed on new WWII procedures. The Luftwaffe did not yet realize that some of the new Mustangs meeting them were the same machines they knew, powered by a different decision. The edge was measurable, transferable across squadrons, and unlike a one-off hot rod airframe, rooted in supply lines and technical orders. From June through August 1944, Allied air combat was shaped by two intertwined demands. Keep the skies over Normandy scrubbed for the ground forces and carve into the V-1 barrage raining across the Channel. In both jobs, the extra manifold pressure unlocked by 150-grade fuel paid immediate dividends. The 8th Air Force's Mustang groups went to work with WEP settings now written into practice, exploiting the boost in climb rate to reach incoming raids faster and using the extra 10 to 20 mph to convert borderline intercepts into successful ones. On the Channel coasts and inside the diver belt over southern England, ADGB Mustangs, Tempests, Spitfires, and Mosquitoes leveraged the low-altitude speed bump to run down V-1s, machines whose 400 mph dash had previously made them frustratingly hard to catch. The point wasn't just statistics. It was rhythm. Higher available power let pilots dictate when to engage, when to press, and when to disengage to refuel and rearm. On deep escort, the change was subtle but critical. Bomber streams still needed cover from assembly to target to withdrawal. What the 150-grade edge did was reduce the penalty for opportunistic strikes and tighten the escort's OODA loop. A section that dove to break up a forming attack could now zoom back to altitude faster. A pilot who sensed a fleeting shot could take it without losing the package forever. These micro-advantages multiplied across hundreds of sorties to raise bomber survival and drag down the Luftwaffe's experienced pilot corps. The Mustang's famed range, unchanged by fuel grade, had already moved the fight over Germany. Now the same airframe's time to climb and dash margins made it harder for Bf-109Gs and FW-190As to create favorable intercept geometries. Of course, nothing in war is free. 8th Air Force technical summaries are frank about the maintenance bill that came with the extra lead in 150 grade. Spark plug fouling accelerated, often forcing plug changes after roughly 2 missions on P-51 units. And roughness could creep in after long, low-power crews. Exactly the regime common on long-range escort. The command issued SOPs, brief bursts of high power to clean out deposits, minimizing long idles before takeoff that largely tamed the problem, but it never vanished. In early 1945, a PEP blend with extra ethylene dibromide virtually eliminated plug fouling, only to introduce valve seat erosion in sustained service. By April 1, 1945, the 8th reverted to standard 100-150 with the lower additive dose. The net, a real manageable maintenance trade for a real undeniable combat benefit.
How did this feel in the cockpit? Pilots talked about 2 Mustangs, the airplane under normal power and the animal. That appeared when the throttle and boost lever were pushed into WPI. The difference wasn't a cartoonish leap, but in a scissors at 25,000 feet or a stern chase against a fleeing 109, that extra 15 miles per hour could break the stalemate. Proving ground curves show a dryly parallel speed line separating as boost climbs from 67 to 75, but the combat translation was visceral. More authority on the vertical, more control of angles, more choice. A 10-second window of plus 15 miles per hour could convert a low percentage spray into strikes walked through a wing route. And if the fight turned against you, the same edge could be spent to extend into cloud, regroup with your element, and come back with the sun. German pilots and controllers sensed the shift before they understood its source. Intelligence logs record frustration at escorts that seemed always to arrive in time. New Mustangs that could dive, zoom, and still be back overhead before the next staffel could reform. To the men at JG-26 or JG-27, it may have felt as if the Americans had fielded a late block Mustang overnight. In truth, depot kits, aneroid adjustments, and new fuel were doing the work. Repositories have captured. Allied technical documents don't show a single Eureka memo in Berlin about 150-grade fuel, but RF. And USAAF orders and data survive in great detail, and they explain the outcomes German flyers were seeing. Meanwhile, statistics were tilting. The 8th Air Force's top Mustang groups, 357th, 4th, 339th, 55th were chipping away at the Jagdwaffes. Veteran Corps at the moment the Wehrmacht needed it most to oppose the breakout from Normandy and defend the Ruhr. Mustangs did not win the air war alone. P-47s smashed airfields. Spitfires and Tempests hunted low. Radar and controllers knit the picture, but 150-grade fuel made the Mustang's core job easier and its margins larger. The cumulative effect was a schedule the Luftwaffe couldn't keep. Too few pilots, too little training time, and escorts that now own not only the geography but the tempo. On April 4, 1945, with victory weeks away, 8th Air Force issued a formal memorandum summarizing its experience with 150th grade fuel. The document reads like the post-action testimony of a quiet accomplice, service-tested since October 1943. Adopted across fighter units by June 1, 1944. Proven to yield extra performance on P-38s, P-47s, and especially P-51s. And worth the maintenance cost once SOPs were instituted. It records the detour into PEP fuel to cure plug fouling and the subsequent retreat after valve seat erosion appeared. Most importantly, it captures the organizational reality. 8th Air Force didn't stumble into better performance, it built supply chains. Issued technical orders and trained maintainers until higher boost was a routine option on the line. The Mustang's edge was not mystical, it was managed. And what of the headline number, 490 miles per hour demons? Here's the responsible, documentary truth that still keeps the drama intact. Official tests put a standard issue. Combat configured P-51B's top speed in the mid-440s at altitude when exploiting 75 inches HG on 150 grade. That's already a huge margin over most 109G and 190A opponents at typical interception heights. In the field, certain conditions, exceptionally cold air, very light load, meticulously smooth airframes, or brief dives converting altitude into RAM and indicated airspeed could drive instantaneous true speeds much higher. That is how veterans came home with nearly 500 on their lips and how the folklore coalesced. The Germans, measuring by outcomes, simply met Mustangs that felt uncatchable. The core reason chemistry enabling boost was hidden in plain sight in 8th Air Force orders. By war's end, every part of the system had absorbed the lesson. RAF files chart the expansion of 150 grade use across a DGB and later 2nd TAF. USAAF memos codify the trade-offs and standardize practice. Even the retreat from PEP in spring 1945 shows a mature organization making evidence-based choices to protect engine longevity after the urgent sprint of 1944. If you zoom out from the airplane and look at the Enterprise, you see the Allied advantage clearly, the industrial base to refine specialized fuel in quantity, the shipping to deliver it, the engineers to wring safe power from it, and the command discipline to adopt it in weeks. Merlins, Mustangs, and men won the air war. But the decision to flood ETO fighter pens with 150th grade fuel amplified all three. It mattered beyond 1945. Post-war doctrine and test. Practice absorbed the fuels and limits mindset. What an engine can do on a dyno matters. But what a force can do with the right fuel, spares, and orders decides battles. That is the lasting legacy of the Mustang's demon mode. The Germans never expected a supply decision to move the needle so far, so fast. When it did, it felt on the receiving end like meeting a new airplane. In truth, they had met a new system,